package of a health, reproductive health for the people. So the mindset finally should change for looking at the reproductive health as one major issue, the different components as a part of that, then roping in the sections of society we have ignored so far. The present approaches worked very well in many states, but they have not worked in many other states. So there you have to come out with the local solutions. Who will work? Who are the people who will provide the health services? So the health systems being part of the research, health system being part of the action. They cannot be the second fiddles, which had happened in the 65 years of the Republic. Few people sitting in the ministry, few people sitting in ICMR, few people sitting elsewhere. We think that we have the knowledge and we are prescriptive. Others people are not part of the thinking process, and that has deteriorated. If you think of the 30 years initially of the Republic, 60s, 70s, 80s, medical colleges were a part of thinking process. States were a part of thinking process. 80s, 90s, this present time has gone like this. But people blame the medical people that they are lost in the practice. But I tell you, it was a leadership failure. If the disconnect happened, the people sitting in my chairs, people sitting in the major chairs in the ministry, they were responsible. They made no attempt to bridge the gap. Creating new aims, creating new specialized institutions is not the problem or the solution for public health. They provide solution for super specialized care, but not for the public health. So I think we have to bring back the same old republic which we were when we got the independence, 60s, 70s, 80s, which I talk about the golden period for this republic, and get back to utilize everybody together and think as a reproductive health as a total package, not ignoring any part, not the way the ART has gone. It has to be a comprehensive, a government-led effort, but everybody else is an equal partner. I think these are some of the thoughts which I wanted to share with you. And I have talked not from a personal, it's not an area I have not worked directly actually, but in the thick of the policy making for I think quite a long period, I did develop the thinking, I did develop the passion, but to reflect that passion there is many people matter actually. Persons like Professor Lohia, and consistently so affectionate, giving me opportunity, making me think more and more, and perhaps now in this new role to contribute also as a catalyst. I think would like to see many more changes, would like to contribute to those changes, but it has to be a concerted effort. I think in which all of us have to join. Not emotionally, politically I'm saying, but all of us have to join, because year by year, time by time, how many people keep on suffering and nothing happens. We could have made a difference. So let's make it now actually. Best wishes. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to have amongst us today Padma Shri Dr. Ranjit Roy Chaudhary to preside over the function. Padma Shri Dr. R.R. Chaudhary is a leading medical researcher, teacher and a health planner of the country. He has served as Dean, Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education, Research, Chandigarh, and has also served at World Health Organization.
Thank you. Dr. Katoch on the dais, Dr. Kamboj, Professor Lohia, Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dr. Rekha Gupta, Dr. Priyanka Mathur, Dr. Priyanka Raghuvanshi, Dr. Ansari, Professor Talwar, other colleagues in the audience, Dr. Sadasuki, faculty of the great university where we are, students, participants at this meeting. First of all, let me say how happy I am to be here with you today. The ambience is excellent. The people who are here are committed Many of them have been path breakers in the country. The atmosphere for discussion is free and open, and I look forward to the discussions. So thank you very much, Professor Lohia, for giving me this opportunity of speaking to you for a few minutes this morning. Jaipur has always had a very close place in our hearts of people of reproductive endocrinologists, pharmacologists, because of Professor Lohia. We remember so many meetings in the yesteryears where we used to have excellent discussions. It was a time when India was in the forefront of contraceptive research and reproductive research. People all over the world would look at journals at that time to see what has come out from Jaipur, from Delhi, from Chandigarh, from Bombay, from Lucknow, from Bangalore, from Chennai. These were the centers that were contributing to the development of the science of contraceptives and research. And it was a great heyday for us. I have looked through the papers coming out today, which will be discussed today, tomorrow and day after, and I feel we are coming back to that era. We are coming back to the era because nobody else is going to do contraceptive research. Nobody else is looking for new contraceptives, although they should be, because it is not a problem of the developed countries. It is not a problem of theirs. It is our problem. And of all the countries in Southeast Asia and Latin America, India is the one that is most poised to make a contribution in this area. We have made big contributions. We have got Professor Talwar has developed the first possible immunocontraceptive vaccine. Dr. Kamboj has developed, as was mentioned earlier, Saheli. Other people have developed so many things. But the trend has become less now, and I am sure this meeting will be a trend setter, Dr. Lohia, in setting this out again. You had a meeting in Jaipur a few years ago which had a lot of effect, and I'm sure this meeting will also have an effect. So what shall I talk to you about? I thought I'd talk to you on the theme of, not that it is the most important, but it is very important, the theme of contraceptive choices. Because this is an issue that is coming up in the future, and you're going to hear a lot about it. What are the contraceptive choices we are giving to our people? First of all, let's accept that the higher the number of choices, contraceptive methods we have, the contraceptive prevalence rate in the country increases. This has been clearly shown. If you have 4 methods, you have a certain amount of contraceptive acceptance, and if you have 10 methods, you have much more. So, in spite of our efforts, and as I said, a few remarkable successes of Indian scientists to discover and put to use new methods of contraception, and in spite of all the efforts internationally, the range remains disappointingly small. It doesn't change. This is one of the very sad things. We are using methods that are maybe outmoded and not sophisticated enough, not sensitive enough. Let's look at it. The National Family Planning Program in India offers only 5 methods. It offers the intrauterine devices, it offers oral contraceptives, condoms, female sterilization, and non-scalpel vasectomy. All around us, countries, Nepal, Thailand, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, they offer 8 to 10 choices. So you as scientists and we as scientists have to discuss today, tomorrow, day after, next week, why are we landed only with a few contraceptive technologies? Of course, we have the right as a country, and a free country, and a strong country with strong scientific base to really decide that yes, we only want 5. We don't want the 6th, we don't want the 7th, we don't want the 8th, we don't want the 9th, we don't want the 10th. But that should be the result of scientific evidence, discussion, dialogue, and then a decision. And this, I am afraid, is probably lacking. So both the university, where we are here today, and the society, which offers a platform, certainly have a role at this. Then look at the methods themselves. In India, we depend very much on sterilization. The last figures that I got from the NFHS survey was female sterilization a few years ago. Female sterilization is 37.3% of all our contraceptive methods. Male sterilization is 1%. Intrauterine devices is 1.7%. Oral contraceptives is very low also, about 2 point something. And condoms is 5.2%. So not only do we have a few methods, but we have it skewed. We have it skewed for sterilization methods, and many of the family planning advisors tell us that these sterilization methods are done after the family has been completed, which doesn't make. So the proportion we have remains about the same. In fact, it may be more. At a recent J.R.D. Tata Memorial Oration on 24th April, Dr. Babu Tunde, Executive Director of the United Nations Fund for Population Activity, said that the female sterilization accounts for 76% of contraceptive use in India. So if his figures are correct, and I have no reason why he should not have the right figures, we have gone up to 76% of our methods using only sterilization. It's something for us to ponder about, something for us to think. And he goes on to say, and I quote him now, greater efforts to expand contraceptive choices and examine quality of services and accountability must be part of broader efforts to provide the rights-based quality health services. So methodology, and everyone today is waking up and saying, why shouldn't we have more methods? Now the fact that I have chosen to speak to you on contraception and contraceptive choices today does not mean that this aspect is more important than other factors. The factors enunciated at Cairo meeting and at the Beijing meeting. I felt that as a multidisciplinary group meeting here today, it is perhaps advice and thinking that only a society like our society or a university like this who can give the answer to this. Sorry, I hope this is not mine. Sorry. So let us look at some of the other methods that are being used in other countries and why we have said we don't want to use them in our National Family Planning Program. It's all right if we decide that we don't want to use it. Dr. Radha Sharma is there, he leads the program on reproduction. But we want to be sure that we do not want, let's say, implants. They are a type of contraceptive where you put in little rods in the body and they are contraceptive. This is being used quite a lot. I believe that the results of the ICMR phase 3 trials will be coming out soon, am I right? And then we will have to make a decision whether we want to use this new method of implants. We did use diaphragms for women. We rejected it. It wasn't suitable for our women. Levonorgestrel intrauterine devices are used. Many countries, we find them rather expensive, and so we are not using them at the moment in the public health sector, although it is available in the market. Injectables are not available in the public sector, although these are again available in the market. Trials have been carried out with the 3-monthly contraceptive. We did some with Professor Devi in Chandigarh itself, then with the 2-monthly or 1-monthly norethistron enanthate. Experts and representatives of civil societies, this is where it comes very important. Civil societies must sit down together and have a dialogue and decide based on science and based on transparency whether we want to use them or not want to use them. This cannot be a matter of emotion in a big country like India with 480 medical colleges, that a group of people say it is bad, don't use it, or another group says it is good, use it. You know, we are far too mature scientifically than that. We need discussions, and I find, I must share with you, that this dialogue between governance, people who make decisions, and the public, civil society, and the NGOs, and the scientists, and academia is very much lacking. This hardly takes place on this sort of issue where we can sit down together and do it. I remember when we had to decide on Viagra, whether we should allow Viagra to be used in India. We had a public debate. We said, let's ask the people of India. Because in the committee there were two groups. One group saying you introduce Viagra in India and you will have total chaos and orgies taking place. The other group said you cannot deprive the Indian men of something that is a development. So as chairman of the committee, we had a public debate in the India International Center. And overwhelmingly, the people of this country, or the people who were in that room, said that no, please release it, we will use it well and we will use it wisely. And that's what happened. We said it could only be prescribed by 2 or 3 categories of doctors, and it has been released and no one has had any problem with it. Similarly, Depo-Provera, methoxyprogesterone acetate, these decisions cannot be made as an emotional decision. These have to be based on evidence and science. That's what I'm saying. Then you have another one, you have the low-dose progestogens, another group of contraceptive technology which we can use, we can think about it. So my point here is, let's think about these things. Let's do this in the spirit of science. And now, the meeting I was telling you about, why Jaipur is so important. The World Congress on Population was held in Jaipur on July 7th and 8th, 2012. And there were the sessions on this, contraceptive technology, current and the near future. And I have gone through the proceedings of those sessions. They were very interesting, and they have led to a lot of meetings and discussion groups after that. I am sure this meeting also will lead to a lot of discussion and a lot of, I hope so. Now let me talk about the 2 areas which would be relevant today. The relevance of a university. In India, universities have not played much part in the development of science for the people, for primary health care, for needs that we have. And this is a great lacuna. And that's why I am speaking about it today here at this university, because you who are leading the university have the power just to provide a platform. To provide a platform for such discussions on national importance. There are lots of problems which Dr. Katoch knows very closely, which we need advice in the government, or need advice. And this advice should come from people who are here. Even if 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people are encouraged by you as the administrators to look into national affairs, look into what can be for diarrheal diseases, what we can do for Kala-Azar, why people are not using medicines when they are available, cheap medicines, and why they want to use injectables always. There's so many things that we would like to hear from you. So I would strongly plead with the students who are here and the faculty and the administrators to please provide a platform for university, for your teachers, maybe 2 or 3 even, as we were saying, I was talking with Dr. Katoch. A few people, that's all at each medical college would make such a big difference. A few people in universities who could reach out and not be, this term ivory tower has always been mentioned with universities. It doesn't have to be an ivory tower. All of us worked in university atmosphere and all of us were encouraged by our leaders and by our teachers, that go out and work with other people. And that's why we left the portal, right? I left pharmacology to go into clinical pharmacology and drugs and other things. So here you have this opportunity. The older universities will find it difficult because they are going on very straight grounds, they are going in compartments. But in a new university you can have multi-area groups, trust groups, clusters and all sorts of things to count. After all, the problems of the country are not too many in health. We can sit down and give you 15 areas where we need help, and that could be done. That is one. The second area I would want to plead is our society. So many important meetings, decisions, recommendations come out of our meetings. But the professional societies in general have kept away from providing advice to government. I'm not talking of our society, which doesn't. But you know, the cardiologists, the rheumatologists, the gynecologists do it much more. But others, they have a mass of data, they have a mass of information, knowledge, which would be used for the country's programs. But as Dr. Katose said earlier and Dr. Kamboj said, this doesn't reach the people, it doesn't reach the primary healthcare level. It's ridiculous that we are exporting medicines to 220 countries in the world. And Dr. Kamboj said correctly that only 30% of Indians, 35 in rural areas, have access to our medicines. I mean, there's something very wrong here. It is ridiculous to say that we are providing the whole of Africa with anti-HIV drugs, that our drugs, generic drugs, are the cheapest in the world, when the out-of-pocket expenses, that means you and I, what we pay, for health in India is 70%, second highest in the world. Why should the Indian have to pay 70% of his expenses on his own, when every country around us pays 40%, 30%, 35%, 38%? We spend 70%. In spite of the fact that we have the cheapest drugs, the good quality drugs, we export drugs, we provide drugs, everything, we provide medicine. See, I'm sure we need help in this. The government needs help. Needs help from economists, needs help from social scientists. And these people are not in the government, they are in the universities. But they are not interested. They are not interested. I once called a meeting of all the social science institutes in India, the director, all of them, to Delhi and asked them to help in the social science aspect of health, and none of them were interested. They said, this is not an area of interest for us. We are interested in other things in social science. They may not be interested, but the country needs these things. And that is one of the big lacunae that we have. So I am taking this opportunity of being able to talk to you, to give you these thoughts, where if we can bring the professional societies in, and I hope that the proceedings of this meeting today, tomorrow and day after, a few important highlights, recommendations, suggestions can be culled out by the organizers and sent to the appropriate people. We will certainly see that they reach the highest people who make these decisions. I mean, this would be a great approach if we could bring in the civil society. And the last is the civil society. We do not take civil society into our discussions at all. If we did, we would do much better. I mean, the reference was made to the National AIDS Control Program. The AIDS Control Program largely succeeded, yes, because we had money, and yes, because we had drugs, but more so because we took civil society into our program. It was civil society that was monitoring it, that was reporting on it, that was giving the medicines out. We cannot ignore civil society today. The two factors we cannot ignore in our coming next 10 years. One is civil society. We have to take them with us. We cannot say we are going to hand down decisions to you. They have to be part of the decision. And you cannot hand down decision to the states from the center. States are not going to take it. The states in our federal system of government, they are going to take part in decision making. They are not going to accept decisions which they do not like. And very few of us have scientific bodies in the states which can help the state leaders to go into these areas. My own experience has been bad in the states. We worked for 2 years at the Medical Council of India and developed a single entry examination to all the states in the country. From one examination in 3 days we would give the results, totally transparent, no one would get in by money or influence. And it was approved by the center and the states rejected it. They said, no, I'm sorry, we don't want it. We are quite happy with our own system. And they went to the Supreme Court and it's got blocked. We neglected to take them with us. We did all the discussions in Delhi, handed it down to them that this is a brilliant thing. We have got the best system that we are going to put in. 3 days everyone will be admitted to medical colleges all over India. There will be no money change, there will be no power, this thing. I said, they didn't want it. There have been other instances also where we have got her. So nothing now goes unless we go to the states and get their back. So I've been wandering around a little, but then I think this atmosphere is so good here today. I see a very reactive audience, and it's not often that I get a chance to talk at a university setting. I get lots of chances to talk at society setting, but not at a university setting. So once again, let me wish you a very, very good meeting. It's very exciting to be here, and I look forward to the proceedings of it. Thank you, Dr. Lohia, and all the organizers.
Thank you, sir. I request Registrar Dr. Rakhi Gupta to present a token of gratitude to Padma Shri Dr. R.R. Chaudhary. May I request Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar to extend a token of remembrance to Dr. V.P. Kamboj. Thank you. I now request Dr. Priyanka Mathur to present a token of appreciation to Dr. V.M. Katuch. Thank you. The Indian Society for Study of Reproduction and Fertility would also like to felicitate the eminent guests on its behalf. I request Professor N.K. Lohia to do the honors.
I think we join IIS University in honoring our esteemed guests, and I'll request first Dr. Smita Mahale to kindly come on the dais. And felicitate our chief guest of the function, Dr. Katuch. Smita ji will felicitate you on behalf of the society. I will request Secretary of the ISSRF, Dr. R.S. Sharma, to kindly come on the dais and felicitate our esteemed guest, Professor Ranjit Roy Chaudhary sir. I'll now invite Dr. Dheer Singh to please come on dais and honor our esteemed guest, Dr. VP Kamboj. In fact, we are so honored today. Do you know youngest delegate in the audience? Professor Talwar. And source of great inspiration for all of us. Today, even today, he spends time with his team in the laboratory and looking into various aspects, bringing new products to the reproductive health research. We are honored, Professor Talwar, with your kind presence in this audience. And we again thank you very much for our esteemed guest, and of course this type of our feelings we will convey during the valedictory function, but once again we thank everybody who became the part of this inaugural function, and of course this is the part which on behalf of the society. Now I'll see that Rakhi Gupta Madam will like to thank everyone of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Padma Shri Dr. R.R. Chaudhary, Dr. V.M. Katoj, Dr. V.P. Kamboj, Professor N.K. Lohia, Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dr. Priyanka Mathur, Dr. Priyanka Raghuvanshi, Dr. Ansari, Dr. Talwar, Dr. Sadasukhi, other esteemed invited speakers, participating delegates, and guests in the audience. It is my proud privilege to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of the IIS University, Jaipur, at the inaugural ceremony of the 3-day National Conference on Reproductive Health Challenges, Issues and Remedies. It is said, every second, every day, every year, we fail to address the demands for reproductive health and family planning services. Lives are lost and girls' opportunities to thrive and contribute to their country's development shrink. This is true, particularly in the context of the Indian subcontinent. This conference has been planned keeping in mind the diverse threats to reproductive health and the development of novel strategies to combat them. I am confident that these 3 days will provide ample opportunities to one and all to exchange their views and research ideas. I'd like to express my deep gratitude to Padma Shri Dr. R.R. Chaudhary for so very kindly acceding to our request to deliver the presidential address. Thank you, sir, for your presence and insights. On behalf of the IIS University, I assure you that we will definitely take initiatives and make all efforts to contribute our bit to in this particular direction. I also take this opportunity to thank Dr. V.M. Katoj for accepting our invitation to deliver the keynote address. Your address, sir, has set the tone for the deliberations that are to take place over the next 3 days. I acknowledge with gratitude the presence of Dr. V.P. Kamboj and thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule and grace the occasion. Sir, the statistics shared by you are alarming and I'm sure must have motivated the audience at large to look for solutions to address issues related to reproductive health. My thanks are also due to all invited speakers for consenting to speak on contemporary issues on the field of reproductive biology. Thanks to all academicians, delegates and students who have come from far and wide to attend the conference. I sincerely hope that your inputs and interaction during the course of this conference will make new contributions to the field and will be of immense value in times to come. The event would not have been possible without the unstinted support and invaluable guidance of Dr. Ashok Gupta, Vice Chancellor, the IIS University. His guidance throughout has given this 3-day event its present shape. I congratulate and thank Professor N.K. Lohia and the Indian Society for the Study of Reproduction and Fertility for taking up the initiative to organize this conference, which I am sure will benefit the society at large. Thank you, sir, for reposing confidence in us and giving us the opportunity to organize this event. We would also like to thank Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dr. A.S. Ansari, Dr. M.L. Swarnkar and his team from Mahatma Gandhi University of Medical Science and Technology for collaborating with us and helping us to organize an event of such a stature and magnitude. The smooth conduct of the event would not have been possible without the team spirit of all our faculty members, student volunteers, research scholars, and the technical and support staff. Thanks to all of them. Lastly, I thank all the media persons whose ample coverage of the conference will bring this contemporary issue closer to public interest and notice. With the hope that this conference will accomplish all its objectives, I wish it all the best. Thank you all. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural ceremony. I thank you all for joining us. We will begin with the first session shortly.
I'm getting present before even delivering the lecture.
I now request Dr. Priyanka Mathur to present mementos to our eminent speakers. Dr. Namita Chandiok, Dr. Seema Sahai, Dr. Smita Joshi, Dr. Veena Joshi, Dr. S.L. Chauhan, thank you, ma'am.
To this plenary lecture by Professor Talwar. The talk is on the development of a safe, highly acceptable polyherbal microbicide for vaginosis. Professor Talwar is undoubtedly, just a few minutes, you all know him, but I want to tell you, I don't think you know him probably as long as I have known him, which is 57 years exactly. It's a long spell, and it's been a great pleasure and privilege knowing him and his wife Raksha. Pran has been a pioneer in institute building. He has built the Department of Biochemistry at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, built the National Institute of Immunology. In building people, that is much more important than institutions. To build a group of people who are now all over the world, carrying the flag that he and the inspirations that he put into them. This group is taking forward what his dreams were. He has also done exceedingly interesting and valuable research for the needs of the country. The first immunovaccine, the leprosy vaccine, came from Professor Talwar's fertile mind, and he built a group together for it. Now today he is telling us about another new development which will affect widely our program in the field of women's health. For all these things, he has been widely recognized, lots of international awards. But much more than that, I think, what he has contributed is that when Pran goes into a room, he brings sunshine into the room. He brings happiness, enthusiasm, inspiration. I have never seen that in anybody else. He inspires everyone in the room, from low to high, to do his best, and takes out from these people who is working with him what they are capable of. That is a quality of leadership. And for that, I think we salute you, Pran, and ask you to that. Thank you.
Well, what a lovely idea to have a president of the session who knows me since 57 years. I never recalled. Well, let's hope it goes on for many more years. I think this conference owes a lot to its organizer, and it is that person who is so dedicated, Professor Lohia. There has never been an activity of this society on so many fronts and on, in a very sustained manner than under his presidency. So I want first to pay a compliment that to keep the society moving in diverse direction by the President, Professor N.K. Lohia. Let me also say that it's the first time I'm speaking in a university which is dedicated to women's education. What a splendid idea. We say, "Bachchi padhao, bachchi bachao," whatever, etc., etc. But the fact of life is that in India we do not give our woman the dignity that she deserves and the place she deserves. So to come to a university which is founded for the women is an experience which is very unique, and I think I'm very proud to come and speak in this university. Now, as regards the subject, let me tell you that I was not shunning the vaccine, but it was Professor Lohia who wanted me to speak on this subject, which, as you will see, is also equally important. But just to tell you that the birth control vaccine is not forgotten. It is, by the way, a unique vaccine. It is directed against a molecule which a normal, non-pregnant woman doesn't make. The fact that it's an index of the pregnancy, a test for the setting in of pregnancy, clearly states that normal, non-pregnant woman do not make it. So therefore, an immunological attack against this target molecule, HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, is theoretically the safest way to go ahead in an immunological way. Yes, to make a vaccine, if at all one has to make. Why a vaccine? I think what Ranjit and others said this a while back. I don't have to repeat. There is a need to have more contraceptive methods which are convenient for the woman to have, and this demands only periodical intake, 3 to 6 months or maybe yearly. We don't know how it will work up ultimately, but it requires no daily, day-to-day intake, only requires periodical intake. It offers the privacy that a woman needs, whether the husband likes her to use a condom or not. Here there is nothing like it. It's just an injection that she has had whenever she wanted. And let me tell you that when this idea was put up, I was facing a lot of opposition. This is especially for the young researchers to know. Please don't lose your heart if people oppose you. They all said he's foolish. First of all, it will never work. If at all it will work, it will render the whole population sterile. It will be non-reversible. Both these ideas were unfounded on any scientific ground. But I had a lot of difficulty in building up this vaccine. That is why it has taken so many years to mature and come to the stage it is. Let me again say that it is the Population Council, the International Committee on Contraception Research of the Population Council, which saved this vaccine. It was being rejected on my home soil with no grant, no facility to pursue it because of these crazy ideas of the so-called specialists. And it is they who saw the merit of it, and they did the phase 1 clinical trials in Finland, in Sweden, in Brazil, in Chile and elsewhere with the approval of the FDA. So therefore, there was a stamp of authority which came in when their paper was published, showing it totally safe in all women who were immunized of whatever nationality they were. Moreover, it was reversible. That was proven without doubt. So at this stage, again let me tell you that before I retired from the National Institute of Immunology, there were already phase 2 efficacy trials conducted on it. It's a very well-known paper in PNAS, Proceeding National Academy of Science, 1994. Science wrote a special article on it that it's a benchmark achievement at the world level. But then I retired in 1994. My successor asked me to leave the vaccine back at the institute which I had created, which was National Institute of Immunology. I left it there with all my good heart, but it lay just dormant for many, many years. In 2006, it is an Indo-US Committee on Contraception and Child Health. It said, where is that vaccine? So our committee people say, oh, it was a concept. It only protected 60% or 80% of women. He said, look, 60% of the American women will be happy to have it. So why lose it if it only works in 60%? And when you can know who those women are after seeing the titers. So it is they telephoned to me to ask, are you willing to revive it? Which I gladly agreed to. So in 2006, I was asked to revive this vaccine. I have revived it. I made it purposely a recombinant vaccine, a genetically engineered vaccine. Why? Because eventually I'm sure it will succeed. If it is to succeed, it has to be made on a large scale. And who will make it? It's the industry which has to make it. So therefore I made a recombinant vaccine which can be passed on to industry. And indeed, let me tell you that at this stage it has already been passed on. The stage at which the vaccine today is, it has been passed on to Messrs. Bharat Biotech in Hyderabad, who will supply for the last trials, which I hope Radhe Sharma would have the sort of energy to initiate and take it through, rather than remain all the time surrounded in one procedure after another, after another, after another. So I'm lost in procedures. This is a vaccine whose efficacy has been demonstrated. This is a vaccine which is totally safe. But because it was genetically engineered, it had to go through some new procedures. It had to go through a committee, the RCGM, which ultimately, though it takes always time to go through these procedures, has approved it. Then they approved the toxicology, fresh toxicology which must be carried on it. They approved the protocol for this toxicology. And what is more, again credit to ICMR, they funded the carrying on of this toxicology in 2 rodent species in marmoset, a subhuman primate at various places. And you have the reports. Those are totally safe. This is again to go back to the RCGM for approval. So you see, we are lost in these procedures. Hopefully, these will be over before my life finishes. And when I can congratulate Radhe Sharma to have at least reconfirmed the efficacy of it at 50 nanograms per ml above titers. So in the very first trials that should start sooner or later, I hope sooner rather than later, I hope he will have the wisdom not only to do the safety, because I'm sure it will be safe, but still please carry on whatever is necessary. But those women who would have made titers above 50 nanograms, if we can take their IUD out to at least see that was it a correct threshold that we fixed up for the last vaccine that I made, which wasn't a recombinant, it was a synthetic vaccine. So therefore, the hope is this vaccine will be there. Let me tell you that meanwhile, science has moved. Besides pregnancy, one other condition in which HCV is made ectopically, unexpectedly, is in cancers, and especially the late stage of cancers, when they are drugs resistant. So therefore, today, Kamboj gave me a good idea. Why don't you start the trials in the cancer cases? Then you won't be held up by Radhe Sharma or by the drug controller. You will get the permissions in a jiffy to go ahead with it. Thank you, Kamboj, giving me this idea. I will see what I can do about it. But I can tell you at least we have experimental data to show that cell lines derived from patients who are drugs resistant and who are in the terminal stages of cancers, when they make HCG ectopically, they can be sort of killed by antibodies against HCG. Now you see, I think I must go to my present day's subject. Now you know this, whenever I talk of vaginosis, many sophisticated scientists think, what is this nonsense, vaginosis? It's an ordinary, common thing. So why bother about it? We have to bother about it. Why? Because according to publications of ICMR, confirmed by others, 30%, every third woman who goes to a hospital in Delhi for antenatal reasons has this condition. She doesn't complain because she feels it's too private to talk of what is wrong with her vagina. And then she also thinks maybe it's a price she has to pay for the marriage that she is engaged in. So therefore she doesn't complain. But 30% of women in Delhi, even to hospitals coming like our India Institute of Medical Sciences, have vaginosis. Its incidence is 50% in rural Maharashtra, which is again reported by a very well-known scientist, Rani Bam. And then, you know, Sudha Salan under the Population Foundation of India et al. Have reported that its incidence is 80%. So almost every woman in slums of Delhi at least has it, maybe also in slums of Bombay and elsewhere. When we thought maybe it's an Indian problem, no, it's not an Indian problem. 29.2% of women in USA in the age of 14 to 49 have it. But you see, they don't keep sitting, they go to the doctor to have something done about it. And obviously there are antibiotics available with which currently it is treated. But you see, what I am going to tell you is something superior to the currently available antibiotics which are used in India and elsewhere against this condition. This is a microbicide, a polyherbal microbicide, which we made some years back, in fact in about 2006. and it is packaged, it is formulated either as a cream or as a powder. Now we felt that the cream requires an applicator to apply and doesn't have the privacy of use for the woman. So therefore we prepared also a sort of powder form of this microbicide, and it is packaged in such ampules. Let me again tell you that we have reached a stage where even this manufacture of these capsules is now passed on to HLL, the Hindustan Latex Limited, Tiruvananthapuram, the company which makes the condom. They have taken it up, and even for my phase 3 trials, phase 2 is over, phase 3 trials, they are going to supply such ampules made at HLL because they are impressed with the extra properties of this microbicide, not only against Basant, but against gonorrhea, against Candida, against HPV, against HIV, all that. So you see, it has a very wide spectrum antimicrobial action. It acts against all these strains of Neisseria gonorrhea that exist and that we have had access to, including 17 strains of WHO. Many of them were resistant to drugs like penicillin, tetracycline, and all these. So they're resistant to those drugs, but those strains of gonorrhea were sensitive, are sensitive to Basant. Again, it is pronounced inhibitory against action is Candida glabrata, Candida albicans, Candida tropicalis. Against all that, it acts, and including strains which are resistant to drugs. So that is the advantage. I never thought our herbs have such good properties till one did this type of work without any prejudice. Now let me tell you that there is an STD center at Safdarjung Hospital. This is a government setup where they mostly diagnose the patients who come with the STDs, and gonorrhea is a very common form of disease from which the patients go to that STD center. Let me tell you that today the in charge of that STD center is so impressed with the Basant, because every strain, that they have removed from the patients, actual patients who come to that center, they are sensitive to Basant. Also, at Aruna Mittal at Institute of Pathology, she has interest in chlamydia trachomatis. It's a very common infection of women, but also men. And again here, whether it is free chlamydia or chlamydia already trapped within a cell, in both cases, the Basant acts and kills those chlamydia. Here is two slides from their published work. The first one shows that dose-dependent cytotoxicity of Basant would kill every bit of the chlamydia at its concentration. And then again here, the last strain in this table is one which was resistant to several drugs, and it was sensitive to Basant. So it's the Aruna Mittal's finding in Institute of Pathology of the ICMR. Here is a finding of Schiller of the National Institute of Cancer, NIH. They felt that what is this fellow doing on and reporting these polyherbals? These are not defined entities. And so I sent him. He asked for it, and I sent him. And he said, "You also send me the constituents of the Basant." So I did both. I sent Basant as well as the constituents, hello, I'm Garth Kamin.